Salut à tous et bienvenue dans la 5e édition de la Bye Week. Aujourd'hui, pas de GG, ce sera moi pour faire l'interview et on va interviewer Kris Durham, qui est le responsable de la NFL Academy. La NFL Academy qui est le pathway, on va dire, la petite formation pour des jeunes de moins de 18 ans, environ entre 12 et 18 ans, que ce soit en Europe ou en Asie et en Australie, pour leur permettre de se développer, de devenir des bons joueurs de foot américains et ensuite d'être envoyés idéalement en université. Donc on discute de ce qu'est la NFL Academy, de l'internationalisation de la NFL, notamment en Europe, sur les dernières années. C'est un ancien joueur de foot américain, c'est un ancien receveur, il est ancien roommate de Matthew Stafford. Il en parle lors de cette émission. Pourquoi cette petite intro? Parce que l'émission sera en anglais. On va faire en sorte d'avoir des sous-titres normalement présents pour que vous puissiez suivre si l'anglais n'est pas votre fort. Donc n'hésitez pas, si vous êtes sur Spotify, à aller sur YouTube pour avoir les sous-titres. Et sinon, je vous laisse avec cette interview d'1 heure environ. Très agréable, en tout cas. Je viens de finir de l'enregistrer. Une interview qui a été très intéressante sur l'internationalisation, le changement entre joueurs vers un bureau, vers un job de bureau. Ça a été intéressant. Tout son parcours est top. Et voilà, j'espère que ça vous plaira. N'hésitez pas à nous dire en commentaire ce que vous en avez pensé. Si vous avez des questions ou des passages que vous n'avez pas compris, n'hésitez pas à nous le faire savoir en commentaire. On essaiera d'y répondre le mieux possible. Et je vous laisse avec cette interview avec Kris Durham.
Je ne suis archi pas d'accord.
Moi, ça fait 3 ans que je me le coltine.
Bon, je me suis peut-être un peu chauffé.
Zola dit j'accuse, moi je dis je m'excuse.
On peut être gonchier sur le podcast ou pas?
C'est rajouter une cerise sur un tas de merde, mais ça fait pas un clafoutis.
Il a pas sélectionné un quarterback, il a pris un manager de chez Burger King.
Il a pas de charisme du tout.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 5th edition of the Bye Week by the Front Office. And today we welcome the former wide receiver of the Georgia Bulldog, 4th round pick of the 2011 NFL Draft, selected by the Seahawks, played for the Lions, Titans, and Oakland Raiders, receiving multiple touchdowns during his career. After his career, moved to player marketing and international development of American football, working as general manager of the Parma Panthers and working as a scout for the International Player Pathway Program. In March 2022, he took over the NFL Academy. Our guest today, Kris Durham. Thank you, Kris. Welcome, and thank you for the invite.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, great. First, let's address the elephant in the room for our listeners and watchers. We will conduct this interview in English, but subtitles will be available for everyone. So for YouTube, feel free to just click on the CC and you should get French subtitles or English if you don't understand my accent. So go ahead and feel free. And if you don't understand stuff, feel free to ask questions in the comments. And that way we will definitely try and answer those either in following episodes or directly there. So Kris, thank you again. So we'll mention a few topics. One, who are you, so that people can understand who you are. Then talking a bit about your role at the NFL Academy, all the international players in the NFL, because that's really interesting to us as French to understand, like, how could we get there. Globalization of the NFL. Again, we see the Saints getting like a French right, so it's interesting. And also, what's interesting to me, and that will be my main topic that I'd like to understand, is like the transition from player to office. I think is really fascinating. So thanks again. And so first question I had for you, because I introduced you with the LinkedIn profile, so it would be more interesting to understand, like, how would you introduce yourself for everyone here?
I mean, that's just kind of the titles that I've run through. As former player, worked for the NFL office in New York, dabbled in real estate and sales, and just tried to find a way back to sport, right? So networked like everyone else. Once you kind of lose your identity in a sport, whether, it doesn't matter how old you are, at some point the sport ends and you have to find what's next. And I was lucky enough to be connected to the NFL and player marketing, and then furthering on into the IPP, the International Player Pathway, and now kind of leading the charge with the NFL Academy. So, I've just been extremely blessed in terms of meeting the right people at the right times and making the right connections. And it's kind of led me to the international American football space.
That's really great to know. How difficult, I guess I'll move the order a little bit, but how difficult was it to transition from player to more of an office job? Like, how was the transition for you? Was it difficult, or did you find stuff that translated from sports to office job, let's say?
There's always a lot that can translate from being an athlete to working in any industry. So you have to have discipline, you have to have a work ethic, you have to be able to work with a team. Those are things that transition from the field or the pitch or the arena onto a business field. So you kind of take your lessons that you learned as an athlete, and you kind of apply it to what you're doing in life for a profession. So those are things that I did. I was lucky enough to have good mentors, people that I could reach out to and speak with that were high level executives in whatever their field of choice is, and just try to pick and choose what aspects they were doing well and how to apply that to my life.
That's great. If you had like one advice, because a lot of our listeners, I guess there's some at least that would love to work one day for the NFL, and we can see with globalization that it could be a possibility. What's one piece of advice you would give them?
It's the same piece of advice I give to our students: is get comfortable being uncomfortable, because you're going to be asked to do things you may not be comfortable with, or things you may not be like a pro at, and you just need to try it. Just go and do it. Network, make yourself uncomfortable with speaking out to people, reaching out to people, because you never know who you're going to come in contact with and who may be able to help you on your journey. Those are things that, I had to get out of my comfort zone to go from being an athlete to a professional in another environment. So, networking and talking with people, you have to ask for help when you need it. And sometimes even when you don't, you just need to make those connections and try to find your way kind of through this world. Yeah,
that's pretty much how we got this interview. I was like, let's try and reach out and see if we can get one. And yeah, I feel like, that's the advice that I applied before getting it. So it's good to see that it's something you would say to everyone. So to understand, before diving through the NFL Academy and all of the international globalization and international pathway program, we used to ask a question to everybody that we get as an interview, which is, what is your first memory of recollection of sports that you have? Either sports, we usually say sports because in France, we try to get like the approach of everybody's a sports fan.
Mhm.
And then what's your first memory of sports? For you, it could be football second or football first, but like, what's your first memory of sports?
Basketball. Growing up at the time, I was the youngest relative. So I was the youngest cousin. So I would grow up trying to play basketball with my older sibling, my older cousins, and things of that nature. My dad is also a teacher and a coach. So I grew up going to his games and doing that type of stuff. So that's what I remember the most is my dad coaching basketball. I'm going to his practices and his training sessions. And then also growing up, spending time at my grandparents' house, trying to compete with my older cousins.
Nice. And what's your first recollection of football then?
So in my family, there's a lot of athletes. So my dad was in athletics. So he did the decathlon and track and field. And so that's what he did in university. And then my mom's younger brother actually played football at Clemson University. So I grew up around it. So my first memory is probably of American football, probably when I was about 5 or 6 years old, starting to kind of understand the game, watching the game. And then when I think I was 7, I started playing for the local community for the rec league team. We were the Cowboys.
Nice. Okay. Nice. So Cowboys, then Bulldogs, and then all the way to the NFL. Nice. And then trying to know a bit more, like, what are your best memories of your professional football career? It could be also athletic, like NCAA as well, depending on what's your favorite memories.
There's things that jump out. Like if you want to kind of backtrack, going to high school, I got to play with the people I grew up with, right? So, I grew up in a very small town in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, an hour or so north of Atlanta. And we were a really good high school football team. I think we went 47-5 during the 4 years at which I was playing in high school football. But getting to play with the kids that I grew up with. So out of the 20 or something seniors that I played with in high school, I think like 15 of us went from the age of 5 through 18 to school together. So getting to play with them is always a great memory. A lot of those guys are still either coaching football or somehow involved in the sport. So that's kind of a cool experience now that I get to kind of, reminisce with them or speak to them about players that I have. And then fast forwarding to, college, obviously your first touchdowns, the Sugar Bowl, us winning that game, things like that always stand out. Getting drafted stands out. And then fast forwarding kind of to pro ball, catching your first pass, catching your first touchdown, those things are really cool, especially when I got to play with my college roommate in Matthew Stafford. So, he threw the first pass I caught in university ball. He threw the first touchdown I caught in university ball. He also threw my first touchdown in pro ball for with the Lions. Being on the field when Calvin Johnson broke Jerry Rice's record for most receiving yards in a season, that was a really cool one. There's just a lot of great experiences with this sport, and it teaches you a lot of life lessons. So that's kind of what I've taken from it, is just trying to apply those great experiences, those people that I know, and then just the life lessons, and just trying to reminisce on those, but just try to move forward.
How's that call when you get drafted? Is it expected? Is it too late? It's never too late because you get drafted, but you know what I mean. Were you expecting it a little bit earlier, or?
No, I was actually kind of expecting it in that same general time frame. The draft is kind of it's kind of what they call like a crapshoot. So you don't know. They kind of project you. Okay, you're going to be a day 3 guy. That's from the 4th round to the 7th round. They're projecting you anywhere from 4th, 5th to 6th round. And so I was kind of thinking, hey, I'm going to go somewhere around the 5th round, was kind of what I was thinking. I got the call in the 4th round, and it was a great call. So I was on the phone with Pete Carroll, who's now the head coach with the Raiders. He was on the phone along with John Schneider, who's still the GM there in Seattle. They were on the phone. I'd gone on what's called a 30 visit, which means they get to bring 30 draft eligible players in for a visit to kind of speak to them and talk to them. It's kind of like in university where they do an official visit where you come in and you get to know the staff and the players and things of that nature. And so they brought me in for that. So I got to speak to them there, and then they wind up drafting me. And so it was a good experience. Seattle is a phenomenal organization. Didn't last long there after I got hurt, and then got released and decided to, instead of re-signing with them on practice squad, I moved to Detroit. But yeah,
reuniting with Matt Stafford. So
with Matthew. Yeah. So that was a tough call, because it's one of those things where your head and your heart are kind of telling you 2 different things. And so I made the decision to go to Detroit, and, it worked out there in Detroit for a couple of years. So yeah, it was good.
That's really nice. That's fascinating. I think we could go a full hour on just your NFL career. That's really great. Your career was cut a little bit short.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any frustration on your side that it wasn't that long?
Yeah, I mean, you have to realize that the average career in the NFL is 3 years.
Yeah,
so
at least that was long.
I extended the average career. I did not have the career I had hoped for, but I beat the average. I extended further than a lot of people probably believed outside of myself. There were areas at which I think I could have done things a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm proud of the career I had. At the end of the day, if you look at it, there's only 5 receivers per team playing in the NFL on a Sunday. So that's 160 jobs available every single Sunday. And for me to hold one of those jobs for 4 to 5 years, like, you have to be the best in the world to do that. And so, I was lucky to get in a situation to where I could kind of show my skill set. But, I think that coaching changes or different areas, I may have not been what they were looking for in an athlete, because at the end of the day in the NFL, there's only about 10 to 15 guys out of the 53 that can make every team. So the rest of us are going to be journeymen, or just have to get in the right situation to kind of hold on to a roster spot, because there's a lot of people coming after those.
And at the end of the day, you caught touchdown passes. So it's like you had highlights, you were on the field for the moments that you mentioned, you got to play with people that you liked, and multiple organizations trusted you at the end of the day. So it's also a sign that it's not just one who got to stuck with you, because they invested in you. Like a lot of teams liked you enough to get you on the roster. So.
Yeah, so they did a good job. I mean, great organizations like Seattle and Detroit, and then I spent a little time there with Tennessee, and then a coffee stop for a preseason there with which is formerly the Oakland Raiders. There's a lot of learnings you can take from each stop. There's differences in organizations and this and that, and so you get to see the best and the worst of things that you like and you don't like, and which is very applicable to what I'm trying to do now, which is help move the needle forward in international football. So trying to give guys opportunity and just understand where they're coming from and where they're trying to go. I just did it in reverse. I started in the US and then worked my way to Parma and then kind of back into the NFL. So it's just trying to be, a servant to our players, our coaches, and things of that nature now.
That's great. Well, that's a great transition to our second topic. You're currently the head of the NFL Academy you've been for the last 3 years. Could you explain for everyone listening, what is the NFL Academy?
So the NFL Academy is essentially an elite football program that is attached to education, because the beauty of American football is that if to progress in it throughout the states, it's actually scholastic. So you have to go to school, you need to earn the right grades, and then go to university, and then hopefully be selected in the draft. Obviously, we have the IPP, which is a different pathway, but for, kids that start with a longer runway, meaning they start, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, the NFL Academy is a great way to kind of progress your skills. We've partnered with a good school there in Loughborough, and our kids come from 20 different countries. We have 68 kids, 20 different countries. So vast range of languages, religions, cultures that kind of grow into one team for a common goal, which is to get better at this game and to compete against the best that we possibly can. So we've had some success with it. It's essentially an elite high school football program that combines education, and we kind of look at the holistic approach of having sports psychologists and academic advisors. We partner obviously with the NFL and other partners of the NFL to bring in speakers to teach them leadership development, so that it's not just centered on football, it's centered on life. And those are things that we try to do to teach.
That's great. I saw that there are two programs. You have one in Australia for 12 to 18, and then you have in the UK for 18 plus, pretty much. I saw like
it's not really 18 plus. The one in the UK is for 16 to 18.
Okay.
Some kids turn 19 their second year there during the school year. So from about September onward, they may turn 19 during their final year with us. But yeah, it's for about 16 to 18-year-old students. The one in Australia is a bit different. Will Bryce kind of heads up that program. Will was formerly the head of the International Player Pathway. They have about 9 or 10 students there that are trying to grow in the sport. So they've started small, and they're periodically growing. But for us, we are a full-fledged team. We're trying to go play games. We just got back from the U.S. on Sunday morning after playing against IMG's national team, which is ranked number 2 in the U.S. The week before, we played against St. Thomas Aquinas, which is ranked 8th in the U.S. For high school football. Unfortunately, we lost against Aquinas by 3, and then with IMG, we were down by 7 with 4 minutes left to go, and they scored a touchdown. We threw an interception. They ended up beating us by 17. So they scored 10 points in the last 3 minutes of the game. So it's unfortunate, but hey, that's where we're trying to get into the same conversations with those teams and show that international players can play this game at a high level.
Yeah. And so then when they're done with the NFL Academy, the goal is for them to go to NCAA programs?
I think the goal is individual.
Yep.
So my goal is to give opportunity. It's to pave a pathway for whatever you believe is next. It's to make people great citizens of the world, to be ambassadors of the sport, whether that means you're going back to France or Germany or Hong Kong or wherever you're from to continue your education and your football career, or does that mean you're going to play at the University of Tennessee? It all depends on the individual. So We just want to give them tools so that they can be successful in whatever's next for them, because not everyone's going to be able to compete and go on to play in the NCAA. You might not get the right opportunity, but you still have a future in the sport based off the lessons that we teach, and also just opportunity in your home country to play.
Do you keep following up with the players once they go out of the academy?
Yeah, we keep up with them. Obviously, it's not consistently weekly conversations, but typically I would say we try to keep in touch, and then support them. If we see something on social media or something like that, they had a good game, they had an interception or a touchdown or a tackle or a start, we try to, highlight that so that we can show that there is a pathway for kids. There's a lot of really good football players that come from Europe or Africa or Australia or wherever that have made it into the NCAA. So the path is getting wider and wider and easier, but it's still very new to a lot of schools. So we're going to have to continue to build that bridge to gain more kids opportunity.
How do you compete in some way with other sports? So you're in London and you're in Australia. I guess in London you could get rugby fans, soccer, football fans, cricket, maybe tennis. There's a lot of different sports that you could go to. Australia is pretty much the same with the Australian football, rugby, cricket as well a bit. How do you try and differentiate yourself? Is it your goal, or is it just you like football, come? Or are you also trying to get people from other sports?
Both. I think a lot more youth have understood American sport more due to social media and access in the games the NFL are playing. So they're interested in the sport. They see it on, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or wherever, they may see it on TV. So it's becoming more available and readily available. So you don't have to explain the sport quite as much to people, but showing the success that we've had with placing, I want to say we've placed, 40, 45 players into the NCAA, showcasing that to parents, to the kids themselves. There's some interest there. And so when we show interest in them, they actually understand what the NFL Shield is. They've seen it's just like the Premier League or Serie A or, any of those type of brands. They've seen it. So they recognize that, and they're like, oh, I have an opportunity to play this. Maybe it could be my future. And then, leveraging the coaching staff that we have, because at the end of the day, the coaching staff we have are extremely good. We cannot develop undeveloped players with undeveloped coaches. So we need developed coaches coaching a lot of undeveloped players, meaning that some of these kids that come in, they may have been playing for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but they need to understand that there is a difference in the speed of the game, the way we teach it, the way we practice. It's no longer a club sport. We practice 5 days a week. We lift 3 days a week. Kids live on campus. They go to school on campus. And we treat this very much how the transition from here to an American university football program is going to be run. So they walk in day one with a great level of knowledge, but also their bodies are accustomed to the level of work that they're going to be asked to do.
And also, you mentioned the goal is not just to get them to be good football players, but citizens of the world. I guess that could also be a way of, because you're talking to kids that are 12 to 18 in general. So you're talking to parents most of the time, I imagine.
Yep.
How's that relationship with the parents? Like, because sometimes you want to get a player, but you don't have to convince the player necessarily, but more to convince the parent. Is it something that's different to NCAA or NFL, where you get to convince the player and maybe the agent as well, but mostly the player?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, the parent has to have a lot of trust that you're going to do right by the child, right? So most of these students that we bring in are going to be under the age of 18. So they're going to be, 16 or 17 years old. So parents need to trust that you are going to help them raise their child, and they're going to need to trust that you're going to do what's right by them. So that's why we do certain things in our program. That's why we have a sports psychologist on staff. That's why we have an academic advisor noting that, hey, they're coming from Germany where they need an arbiter, but what is the equivalent to the arbiter in England, so that if football doesn't work out, they can still go back to their home country, their education's in order, so they can go back to university there, and also then relate that that education to the US. So if they decide to go to the US, it's also eligible there. So there's a lot of nuances. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but there's a lot of nuances where every single kid we look at is individualized. We then speak to the parent about all of the support we have. So whether that's the 2 physios that we keep on full staff, the strength and conditioning coach that we just brought over from the US, and Darren, who played at Alabama, coached at a lot of different universities in the US. Our head coach, Coach Hagan, who's coached in the NFL and across, spent 40 years coaching the NCAA. We try to show the level of support that the student's going to have. And then from an educational, also the support that they have with that and the growth that they have. And then, what we're doing on, usually every Wednesday, where we bring in speakers or we do something to level up their character development or their leadership development.
Feels to me like this is a bit of what I've done in university, but for them is when they're 16, 17. Do you feel like sometimes it could get not lost on them, but the fact that when I was 16, I didn't know what I wanted to do. At least they know that football is in their horizon. How do you make sure that what you're teaching is actually being heard and not just them being on TikTok, for example? It's a bit exaggerating the traits, but trying to understand, like, how do you make sure that every content is relevant for them?
That's why you bring in different speakers, because you never know who's going to get through. They hear my voice all the time. They hear Coach Hagan's voice all the time, but there could be someone that comes in to speak to them or something else that resonates or kind of, and they start paying attention. So that's why we do bring in extra people to kind of repeat similar messages that we kind of share. I mean, we have our own pillars of the program. We have our messaging of the program, but we want people to also come in and speak to their experience, because I may be able to relate to you, but I don't relate to that person over there. So that's important so that we can get more and more people kind of connected into what's happening. The other thing is that, kids have a short attention span, especially now. Yeah. So we try to do things that are fun and engaging that kind of get their attention. But then at the same time, we, you talk about leadership. Well, a team, there's individual leaders in position groups across the team, everything of that. So peer-to-peer conversations, peer-to-peer leadership is also something that can drive forward the messaging and things of that nature.
Did you see that also in the NFL? Because we always hear the player-only meetings. Mm-hmm. Was that also something in your NFL career that you felt like helped a lot, player-only meetings?
It does, because those are your peers. Those are the people that are holding you accountable. So they do work. It's one of those things where we didn't have them quite as frequent. Usually the reason you're having the team-only meetings is if something negative or something really positive is happening. But yeah, I think they do work, because I think having your friend hold you accountable or tell you to work harder hits differently than a coach saying, let's go. The best teams are always player led. So those are things that we preach, is that, like, I'm not the one sitting in, your psychology class. So if you're acting up in psychology, it needs to be your peer to tell you to stop. It doesn't need to be the teacher. It doesn't need to be any of that. So, those are things that sometimes we may not be aware of what they're doing off the field or away from us, but their peers are, so they can have those conversations, and it's easier conversation than when they get to us.
That's really interesting. Moving out a bit of the NFL Academy, you mentioned at the beginning that you were also working at the Parma Panthers as a general manager, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I played for Parma for a couple of years, and then after my playing career, I went. I would help them recruit and kind of do a few things there. So my wife, I met her in Italy. She's from Italy. She's Italian. So yeah, I have a fond memory of Parma. I go back obviously a couple times a year to visit her family and things of that nature.
How interesting was it for you because that was straight after the NFL? Mm-hmm. You mentioned sales, that you were doing like real estate also. So general manager was one of those jobs that you did right after. Mm-hmm. Was it something that was interesting to you to do this? Did you envision yourself doing this long term in terms of like being a full GM?
In Europe, there's not a lot of money in doing that. This was more my way of giving back. It was more of a volunteer thing. So what I was doing with them was kind of, while I was in the US, I would help them recruit. I would help, organize things and do things of that nature. I was working closely with the coaching staff or with the team president on trying to help grow Parma and get the best players available. So I really enjoyed it. And, it was just something that they used me to try to help with, because my story, again, peer to peer, I would resonate with players that were finishing up their university careers and trying to explain to them, hey, there's still life of this, even if you don't make it to the NFL, or even if you do and you want to continue playing, there's still areas where you can come. Because a lot of Americans back then, because you're talking about 8-9 years ago, they weren't quite as aware of American football as they may be now. So they're thinking, oh, the NFL is not a shot. What am I going to do now? Well, there's still a chance to come over to Europe and kind of continue playing while also experiencing a little bit of life and culture and, kind of doing stuff like that.
Yeah, because it feels like today in the US, what's after the NFL if you don't cut it could be XFL, what's now the UFL, or going to Canada for the CFL. So it's good to understand that you also have Europe, and it's not just understanding that you have Europe; it's making sure that Europe is viable for them as well. Because it's not just.
I mean, you have a lot of good teams. I mean, even just if you're looking at France, like, I've been around Paris, so obviously the Musketeers, La Courneuve, the Flash there, they have a lot of good teams in France. They have a lot of good teams in Germany. They have a lot of good teams in Italy, and kind of everywhere. So it depends on what opportunity you get, but also what do you want to experience? Because I was very keen on going to Italy just because I had visited places and I was like, oh, cool. Like, I can go to Italy. I can continue playing. I had a goal to play until I was 30. I was 29 when I got to Italy. So I was kind of like, okay, if I play one more year, then I get there. Met my wife, went back, played while I was 30. So, that was kind of, I reached that goal while also extending my what's next opportunities, because I still had a little bit of playing left in me. So, that was kind of cool.
That's great. That's great. I'd love to talk a little bit more about international players in the NFL, because you mentioned US players going to Europe, which is great. We could see that with the Musketeers. We could see that with the defunct now European League of Football. That's going to change to something else next season. But the other way around, one of the best success stories of the NFL International Pathway Program feels like it is Jordan Mailata from Australia. How much are you relying on that type of success story of players that are from abroad going back to the US in your goals of getting more players to sign up either to the academy or via the international program?
Well, when you look at international, like look at basketball, for instance. So basketball has significantly grown in the last 25 years. And the reason for that is that there have been more and more international players enter the league, which make them homegrown heroes, right? So Jordan's a homegrown hero of Australia. Just like you've had different guys from France, like Maceo Beard came out of France, went through the IPP, signed with the 49ers. He's actually a coach on our staff now. So you need localized players to help push it forward. So we've had success with a few German players and a few others across Europe. But that's what you need. You need someone who can relate to the culture. You see Amara St. Brown with speaking German and just being able to relate to the German people because his mom's German. Those are just great stories to tell, but it also keeps people interested in the sport, what's going on, and things of that nature. So, for us to grow the sport and be a global entity like soccer is, or what I would call soccer football.
It's fine. We call it soccer as well.
Yeah.
On the podcast, at least, so that we know what we're talking about.
So, to do that, you need local players. You need local players to grow the sport because they need to see that there's a pathway for them into college football or into the NFL.
Yeah, in France, we had that little push. We were hoping in a few different instances. One of them was Junior Howe, who was in the IPP and didn't get drafted, but went to the Vikings in the practice squad.
Yeah, he was with Carolina for a minute and then the Vikings. And then you had Maceo. You've had, I'm going to blank on his name, but you have the guy who's at SMU right now, Jeffrey Mba.
Okay.
He's got a chance to make it. You have, I think it's Wilfred
Penne, yeah.
Yeah. So I think he's another one that still, potentially has a chance to sign and has had some interest from the Patriots and things of that nature. So there's a lot of talent in France in particular. It's just going to take time, just like anything else. You have to have someone break down the door, just as, you had different people in the NBA or other levels kind of break the door down and kind of open the flood of talent coming in.
We're waiting for our NFL Tony Parker. That's what we're waiting for, because
Exactly.
that's definitely what built a generation that we can see now with the number one overall picks in the NBA, with Wemby and Rizache and Sarr and all of those players that are actually getting touted as the next big thing. Sorry.
Then makes your national team when you compete at the Olympics or anything else. It just makes them better. You've seen what they Team France is incredible at basketball, right? So they compete with basically all of the U.S. the NBA players from the U.S. They take them to the wire because they have the talent to compete in basically a U.S. dominated sport. Well, that's what you're starting to see with this sport, is that you're going to have a lot of good players, and Flag included. I think Flag's going to help develop quarterbacks and receivers, because one thing that's fact is that you cannot play the game without a quarterback. The quarterback makes everything run in practice and in the game, because if you have no one that can throw the ball in practice, then how are you supposed to defend the pass? Okay, that goes and then also like the run game. So when you play 11 on 11 football, a quarterback's the one that's getting the ball out, that's checking the plays, that's handing it off. There's a lot of nuances that only a quarterback can do. So as you continue to develop, the better the quarterbacks are, the better your receivers are going to be, which means your defensive backs. And then your offensive line and defensive line are going to have to play a different style of game that's more accustomed to what's across the sea.
So for you, that's the key, is quarterback play.
Absolutely. If you look at the ELF, or whatever you want to call it now, you look at just the European leagues in general, where there's the GFL, the French league, the Italian league, whatever, they all bring in American quarterbacks for the most part. Why? Because they need a good quarterback to run the show and to do everything. As you develop better and better quarterbacks, that means that the entire talent surrounding them is going to develop with them, because then they're able to run the right routes. They're going to have the right timing. They're going to have a lot of different opportunities.
Because it could be some of the frustration that you could get as a European fan, is to see American players coming in and taking over what the European players could get as opportunities, especially a quarterback to develop, etc.
Yeah.
What you mentioned is really interesting to understand, that everybody gets better with a better quarterback. So, that's great to see. And with the IPP, we saw rugby players a lot of the time get into the IPP. There was for the Chief, Louis Reed-Zammit, the Welsh rugby player, and during the I don't remember I think that was last off season, where Antoine Dupont, the French rugby player, went to do a little bit of PR moves with the Chargers. That's, I think, the most amount of coverage France did on American football, because I think everybody was expecting him to maybe play or do like preseason snaps, etc. Do you see getting like developed rugby players as a big opportunity for the game to develop internationally?
It's a different sport and a different skill set. While it's a very physical sport, so they're going to be accustomed to the contact and things of that nature. The change of direction is going to be difficult for rugby players, because it's very linear and straight line. I know they kind of come at you like this, but if you're a winger, you're kind of standing out there, what you would think is a wide receiver. But a wide receiver is going to cut in, out, this way, that way, and people get hit from all different angles, which is very uncommon for rugby. So that's going to be some of the difficulties. But to say that these people are not elite athletes like Lewis, these guys are elite athletes, and they're used to contact, and they're very similar in body structure and body type. It's just going to be having them learn how to change direction. I think is probably going to be the biggest hurdle, along with how cerebral football is. People don't think about the cerebral part of it, where, if you've seen The Quarterback on Netflix, right, they take us through where it's like Jared Goff talking, and they're all talking about in that 40 seconds, what's all going in their head. They have a play coming in, they're checking the line, they're checking this, they usually call two plays, so they're canning to another one. And then as a receiver, I can speak to that. I have two plays, so I'm checking to see what happens. And then they check to the second play. Okay, so I'm thinking alignment, assignment, adjustment, execution. So if they rotate to a different coverage, my route changes or my block changes, which means the quarterback has to be on the same path. So it's very cerebral, and you have to know where everyone's going to be successful. And I think that's part of the game that people don't comprehend or think about, is how cerebral and how much thinking and processing you have to do. Because a fast player that does not process is not going to be fast. Like, doubt is a heavy load. So when you have a doubt in your mind that you're not going to do it, it's going to sit heavy on you, and you're not going to be able to move as fast because you're doubting what you're doing. But when you can play free, you can play fast. So those are things that we even preach in our academy, is make it simple so that people understand what they're doing so they can play fast. Because the faster you play, the more opportunity for success you have. So even if you mess something up, if you're playing fast, you have a chance to recover.
I completely get that, and I think it happens in a lot of sports. What you mentioned when you have doubts. I used to play tennis quite a lot. When I was feeling confident, everything was going in, and when I was stressed, every ball was harder to hit. It was trying to get it in the court, sometimes good, sometimes not. So you play like bad balls, and it's like really, really difficult. So I completely get what you mean. And regarding the cerebral aspect, I think somebody that does a great job at this point, especially on social media, to make everybody understand how important the cerebral aspect is Tom Brady, explaining that his advantage and his difference maker wasn't speed, but it was speed of processing.
Yeah.
And when you understand that all right, instead of having because you understand everything in a second, everything is quicker because you don't have 3 seconds to understand everything, and you have to roam around the pocket to make sure that you get the right play. So yeah, and I think that's where it's difficult for us, at least in France. And I'm just going to talk for me, who got into American football a little bit later. I feel like it's more difficult to get what's you understand the sport, but understanding how to play it is a completely different game.
Mhm.
So being able to do it from a younger age is really important. That's where the academy is great. And that leads me to my next question. Do you think that flag football being at the Olympics in 2028 is going to help? I was able and fortunate enough to cover the Euro flag, which happened a
The
few
world in France, in
Yeah.
Paris. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, which happened a few weeks ago, which was a great event. And France didn't do that great, but they did great at least. But like finishing fourth, I think, in both, or third in one of those. It was really interesting, and it's a lot of friends I saw and chatted to them about. I was like, hey, I'm gonna cover this and do commentary for it, and they were like, oh, I'll have a look. It's more difficult to get them to watch American football, but flag football was great. And I had a lot of friends that said, oh, can we play that? And it's more difficult. But do you see flag football being a good help in developing American football in general worldwide?
I think it's going to develop skill positions.
Yeah, because you have no lines. Yeah,
No line.
Yeah.
So your quarterbacks are going to develop because they have to learn how to throw the ball and throw it on a smaller field. So things happen a little quicker. So they're going to have to process what's happening, and you have someone coming at you. So you have to be able to adjust and avoid. I think that will help a little bit, as well as receivers having to learn concepts and routes and things of that nature. I love the fact that flags in the Olympics. I think it gives more opportunity to more people. It's both genders, it's everything. So I'm very happy that, IFAF and NFL and whoever else had a hand in it were able to get that into LA 28. But it is still two different sports. So while I love it in that aspect, it's still a very different sport, playing flag and playing tackle. So while one will help the other and it'll bring fans and opportunity, it's still something that, from playing flag and then transitioning to tackle, is going to be two very different things, from a processing and from 11 people on 11 instead of 5 on 5 or whatever. You're going to have to be able to process at a different rate and learn that. But building skills is going to be great for younger kids, and then opportunity as you grow. Some people may gravitate towards flag because of the less contact, but also the speed of the game, and it happens faster and it's more exciting and things of that nature.
Yeah, and early July, the Saints were in France for there was a game of the Musketeers, and there was also a big.
I went to the embassy with the Saints and all that stuff. Yeah.
Nice. I was at the day after in Tremblay or something like this, where Demario Davis was there and the Saints team was there for a flag event, and the number of people that were there were in terms of playing kids playing was a lot. I was expecting way less, so it's good to see at least that like now they have a core memory of football and flag football that they won't get with another sport necessarily.
No.
And yeah.
I mean, when you look at it, it's similar to basketball. Like to play tackle, it's expensive. There's a lot of money involved because the helmet costs this and the shoulder pads cost that. And then with flag, it's similar to like basketball. You roll out a ball and you can just play. And so, you need the little flags and things of that nature, but you can kind of just show up and play in a park or anywhere, which is a really cool aspect in building fandom and opportunity and things of that nature. I think that's where flag is going to have its biggest impact, is just being all inclusive, male, female, ability, disability, anything of that nature. Everyone can play, everyone can learn it, everyone can be a fan of it. And so that's the beauty of that sport, is that, it's all inclusive, as well as people are getting an opportunity to play something that's a little faster, a little more fun, no contact. So if you don't like that part of it, but it's just, I don't know. I've played flag a couple of times. I like it. I think it's a very different sport, but it's a fun thing to do.
And when I play with friends, we play American football, but technically we play flag because we just have a center, and then the center gives the ball to the QB, who then pass the ball to receivers.
Yeah.
And we do that on the beach. We do that on
Exactly.
We did it on 1 year in the shuttle to go to London to go see a game.
Cool.
So because there was no other car, so we were like, all right, let's just play a bit, and it was it's easy, and this is what soccer is great at. You can just get 2 backpacks, a ball, and just play. And when I was a kid, I used to play with a glue stick instead of the ball to play football. Well, soccer. So I think like seeing that you don't have to do contact to get to the game can be a great way to get it.
It's gonna be fun. I'm really excited to see who I don't know if it's 6 or 8 teams are going to be invited to LA, but I'm really excited to see who ends up getting those those opportunities, because I know from a men's side, I know Team Italy kind of came out on top in the European, which was a little unexpected. But for me, I know a lot of guys on that team, having spent time in Italy, so I was really excited for them. But yeah, I'm super excited to see what countries are going to represent, and hopefully, even as an American, I hope someone kind of takes a jump from a men's side and kind of knocks them out and see what's happened.
Yeah, definitely. We mentioned, I mentioned at least London and the games. It's been a few years where the Jaguars at least has been one of the pioneers team in the development. We have a joke in the podcast that we're just waiting for them to be called London something in the next years. Do you see the impact of that team and in general the NFL going to London in the number of people signing for the NFL Academy?
I think everything resonates with people. Again, you never know what they saw or what they did, but there's a lot of fans that show up at those games. There's a lot of brands that are partnering with the NFL, whether that's clothing or whatever, accessories, anything of that nature, because it's becoming kind of a fashion thing to wear the NFL shield or to do things of that nature. So I think it's a combination of everything, having games so people can see it live and in person, and then having the right marketing and things behind it so that kids and parents and everyone see it, and then just being visible. Again, I think, to be present, you have to be present. So for us to be in a market playing the game, we have to be there to play the game. So every little ounce helps. So having the Paris Musketeers or, the Stuttgart Surge or whoever, I think that also helps grow the game. But the key is that you have to grow coaches, you have to grow officials, you have to grow the entire game to make this relevant, because people have to own it and take advantage of it. The NFL just can't throw a bunch of money at it and then leave. They actually need to invest time and energy and opportunity for coaches. They need to invest in opportunity for players, for officials, for everyone, so that people can then localize everything else and make it their own version of it.
Nice. We were talking about the NBA a bit and drawing comparisons between the two leagues. We are hearing rumblings, at least I am. I haven't seen if that's official or not, about the NBA Europe coming soon in the next few years. That feels like it's being in motion at this point. We know about NFL Europe from the early 2000s. Do you see, not necessarily NFL Europe making a comeback? Maybe you do, I don't know. But do you see maybe a pathway for something different, something like either, like you mentioned, a league, or maybe you said that you're trying to give them access to NCAA programs. Could that be something that, NFL University or something in Europe, so that they can get a pathway for people leaving the academy who wouldn't want to go to the US this necessarily quickly, but would want to build an education? Could that be something that could happen, or how do you see the NFL in Europe in general?
I think even if you look at universities, like last year, you have the game 0 over in Dublin, right? So I think it was, I don't even remember who it was last year, but like next year, it's like Kansas versus Arizona State, and they're playing in London. And then you have the North Carolina and whoever's playing in Dublin. So you even see universities now starting to come over and try to market themselves and play games over here, because it attracts fans and money and potential talent and everything else. So I think you're seeing our sport grow, but looking at a NFL division in Europe, I think the first thing that's probably going to happen is having 16 games outside of the United States. So, right now you have Brazil and Mexico and, 3 in London, 1 in Germany, 1 in Spain. I think you're going to see that consistently grow to where there's 16 or 17 games outside of the United States. So every week there's an international game.
Starting week 1. Yeah, pretty much starting week 1 today. So yeah.
So I think that's going to probably be the next step on all of it, is having multiple games. Now there could be a team like the Jags, they're remodeling their stadium. Could they come over and spend like 3 weeks playing back to back to back in the UK? I could see that being part of that idea. Again, I don't know. I'm not privy to those conversations internally. So all this is kind of my thought process on it all.
Yeah.
But that's what I foresee, because you would need to put an entire division over here to make it relevant. And it's hard to cross from a time zone standpoint. So it's very difficult on your body, on everything. So, you see people talk about the game starting at 2:30. Well, the Rams just came over. They spent a week in Baltimore after their game, and then flew over for just 1 day. Maybe that's what you start seeing teams do, is that they don't pay attention to the time clock and they don't worry about it. They just kind of spend the East Coast, and then they start practicing early in the morning at 8, 9 a.m. So their body clocks are used to it. So those are things that are going to have to play into a future. Hopefully there will be. I just don't see it in the next 5-10 years, us having like 4 teams in Europe.
You didn't play a game in Europe while playing in the NFL?
No, I missed out. So I got released from Detroit the year they came to London. When I was in Seattle, we were supposed to play in Canada. And then when I was in Oakland, they played in Mexico, and I got released before all the games. So I had to come over here and do it on my own.
Just take matters into your own hands.
Yeah. So I ended up doing it that way.
That's great. I'm looking at my question. I feel like I did everything. What are the I guess, to finish, what are the main goals now of the academy moving forward in the next few years? Are you looking to maybe open a new academy? Because I know there's one in Australia, there's one in the UK. You mentioned players coming from like Nigeria. Mm-hmm. Is there a goal to maybe open one in Africa?
I think it just depends on what we decide the vision of it is. Right now, I like the way we're set up. What I would like to see for our future is start implementing a junior academy. So we start getting players in younger, so they have a longer runway, learning the sport, developing. Also, I think you need to start tying in flag to it. so that you have a full-fledged like hub of international football. So you have the academy, a junior academy. I think you need to start talking about, hey, what does officiating look like? What does coaching look like? And start developing plans to grow coaches. Again, I think I said it earlier, undeveloped coaches coaching undeveloped players doesn't get you anywhere. You got to have developed coaches coaching undeveloped players to grow the sport. So, the local coaches, the ones that are, taking off on their Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights to coach and then spending all day Saturday with this, taking time away from their family. We need to give them opportunity to grow as coaches and to grow within the sport. So I think that needs to be a priority in our future planning, is to make sure that we include all aspects of the game and not just focus simply on players. You got to focus on everything. You got to focus on flag. You got to focus on junior academies. You got to focus on the academy, the IPP, coaching, officiating, all of that. That's what I would like to see, is a true hub model where we can bring that all in-house and give opportunity to everyone.
Amazing. Do you, and last question I had, do you see a big impact in those 12 to 15 years? 12 to 15, being 12 to 15 as a kid, because you get them from 16 to 18 in the UK, and in Australia you get them from
big. People come to the sport however they come to the sport. Sometimes it's later, sometimes it's earlier, but the earlier you have someone learning the sport, the better their opportunity is and the better chance that they're going to figure it out. So, I started playing at a younger age. I quit football and came back to it, but I already had the foundation built. I'd already been coached. I already knew the rules. I already knew how to play the game when I came back to it. So having someone who's, 13, 14, 15 years old gives them a longer runway, even if it is the 3 days a week, but they build that and they get in the weight room. They start building strength and confidence and learning of the game. It's just a longer pathway to whatever the goal is. I think it's a massive, every year you get is one more year you have to learn and to develop. So I think it's a big opportunity if we can do that.
Well, Kris, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion. I did, at least. And I encourage everyone to go and check the NFL Academy, as you mentioned. Do you have games in the future? You mentioned you mentioned the Queeness, but
we just finished up. We have 2 more in Madrid around the NFL Madrid game. We're going to be playing a team out of Mexico and then also a team out of Madrid. So they're both kind of putting teams together right now, an academy over in Mexico, and then obviously kind of an all-star Madrid team. And we're going to play like a jamboree of sorts where everybody plays each other on a Friday night and then Saturday morning. So that'll be a lot of fun. The other thing is that we're going to have combines. So the next generation, we're probably going to announce those coming up in the next week or so. The one in Paris is going to be November 29th, I believe, whatever that Saturday is. And so we'll be in the Paris area. There'll be, we're going to Canada, Mexico, Germany, France, Sweden, obviously in the UK as well, in London, and then where our home stadium is in Loughborough. So those are kind of the areas that we're going to be hitting over the next probably 3 months for combine. So any athletes that are interested, please sign up, and we'd be happy to kind of go from there with you.
We'll try and put a link in the description of the episode. So I'll ask you for the link and we'll put it. So don't hesitate. So please check out the NFL Academy. And if you're in Madrid for the Commanders against Dolphins game, if you're here a few days early, do you know where the games are going to take place?
Yeah, so it's at Valle Hermoso, which is where the Madrid Bravos play. That's where our games are going to be held there in Madrid. So we will kick off the Friday night at 6 p.m. It'll be the Academy versus Mexico. The next day, on Saturday morning at 11 a.m., it's Academy versus Madrid. And then at 4 p.m., it's Madrid versus the Mexico team.
Okay. So like a big round robin type of.
Yeah, just a jamboree of sorts. So it'll be a lot of fun. A lot of good competition. We're excited about the opportunity to go there. But it'll be a lot of fun. We've had, I think today we have a little competition going on, but we've played, I think, 7 or 8 games so far this year. So that'll kind of round up our season and be kind of a bowl game of sorts. But we're excited. We're excited about it.
That's great. Well, thank you, Kris. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope English wasn't that big of a deal for everyone. Hopefully subtitles helped. And we'll see you guys for a next episode. Thank you, Kris. Voilà, j'espère que cette interview vous a plu, que vous en avez appris sur la NFL Academy, sur ce qu'ils pensent du flag football, d'une carrière de joueur qui se transforme en carrière dans un bureau. J'espère vraiment que, voilà, que ça vous a plu. On va essayer d'en faire d'autres si ça vous plaît, d'essayer de contacter d'autres personnes qui travaillent à la NFL et d'essayer de comprendre soit leur parcours, soit leur travail, comment on fonctionne, etc. Je sais que GG a une prochaine bye week qui devrait arriver d'ici un mois environ. Si ça vous a plu, n'hésitez pas à mettre un petit like sur la vidéo. Nous, ça nous encourage beaucoup à faire ce genre de contenu. Et puis, on se retrouve pour des prochains épisodes, que ce soit des reviews, des previews ou d'autres bye week. Du coup, je vous souhaite à tous une bonne journée. Merci d'avoir écouté ou regardé cette vidéo. Et vive le football!